New names. People rename things and even other people. This makes them think that they are different from what they were before. Let us take a neutral example. Have you noticed how even at present the majority of buildings are made of mud? But people will not have it that they live in mud houses. Every home is also an imitation of a cave. But we do not think much of cave dwellers, so they are called houses. The dervishes from the other world. 3 dervishes returned from the other world. People, understanding that they had become altered and wanting to follow their path, asked what had helped them. "Peas pudding," said the first. "The Book of Wisdom," said the second. "Following a certain man alone," said the third. Some people thought that they were mad. Some thought that they were deliberately speaking in riddles. Some thought that this or that way was the one to follow. In reality, however, each had benefited from his own capacity and needs, in accordance with certain patterns, which are only known to the men of greatest wisdom. Clever and profound. Statements which are merely clever and which have no development potential are often imagined to be profound because they look or sound attractive. And profound remarks, which have indeed got development potential, are as often deemed to be no more than clever. The reason. The cat said, "What funny faces mice have! That's why I have to destroy them." Epoch-making. People who feel it necessary to describe their activity as epoch-making are more often than not deluded. They try to make epochs, because in this way their own importance will be created or increased in the mind of others. What really counts is effect, not size, nor noise, nor personalities, not even a sense of the colossal. Permanence. Somebody quoted the proverb, "Nothing violent is permanent." What a nice hope. I'm sure that everyone would agree with it. It seems a pity that the originator of this saying did not admit his hearers further into his wisdom by giving an example of something which is permanent. The toads in the castle. Once, in a reverie, I saw a community of wholly admirable toads. They had taken over and made their home in a castle, obviously to me originally built by men. I spoke their language in my dream and asked them to explain to me, as a matter of information, the origins and uses of the various parts of their castle. They were kindly and hospitable toads, and they gave me full details of their lives and thoughts and the way in which the building was used. Every single aspect of the castle and its surroundings, including the moat and the marshes and reed beds in which it was set, had a thoroughly plausible use and a toad origin, in theory, indicative of toad thought and toad design, conclusive to the toad-minded. I said, "Brothers, forgive my seeming discourtesy, but this place was formed, designed, erected, by other beings. It was intended for quite different purposes than you have mentioned." Some did not hear at all. The whole idea was so strange that it did not even register with them. Some said shortly, "You are a liar or a cheat." Others, trying to help me, said to one another, "Poor fellow, he is raving mad." That, of course, quite disposed of me. The Man and the Tiger. A man, being followed by a hungry tiger, turned in desperation to face it and cried, "Why don't you leave me alone?" The tiger answered, "Why don't you stop being so appetizing?" thinking and knowing. People think that they think things, and they also think that they know things. They could usefully give some attention to the question of whether they know what they think and know what they think they know. Teachers and students. People often say, "I must find a teacher who knows all." Some, at least, of such teachers have started by learning wisdom from the ignorant, as some learn conduct from the ill-mannered. Many aspirants could do worse than start at that very point. When you have been your own teacher for a time, you may be ready to find someone else who can teach you. The driver, horse and cart. One day a driver thought, "I'll let the horse and cart go where they like. Maybe I'm trying too hard to be the man in control." All went well for a time, since the horse took the cart on its accustomed route. But when the driver willed it to go another way, nothing happened. "I need more willpower and less discipline," said the man to himself. One day the horse thought, "Why should I obey?" And he started to pull the cart as and when and where he wanted to do so. The man sold him to someone who kept him on a very short leash indeed. Yet another time the cart thought, "I will assert my independence. At times my wheels will go, at others I will make them stick, sometimes I will creak, sometimes not, and I will loosen and contract my nails as and when I feel like it." The cart, pronounced unreliable, was chopped up for firewood. Who cares? It is not only a matter of not caring who knows, it is also a matter of knowing who cares. 3 wishes. A man, after many years of study and effort, found out how to gain power over spirits. He conjured a jinn. The jinn gave him 3 wishes. He immediately wished for money. Spending all his money on high living, he became an alcoholic. His second wish went on making him well again. Now he felt so undecided as to what to do, he used up the third wish to restore himself to his original state and to forget his experiences. Higher perceptions. People imagine that higher perceptions might be attained by developing a certain inner sense. But when a person has been working too much on the development of a certain inner sense, it is necessary to teach him by another method. This method works with the concept that the sense can be activated through the exclusion of factors which inhibit its operation. Feed and exercise a lion in a cage, you may get a fine, robust lion. In order to fulfill his destiny, we may have to turn our attention from him to the cage. The donkey and the cactus. A donkey came along and said, "What are you eating?" "The most delicious of food," said the donkey. The dog took a bite at it. "You treacherous wretch," he cried. "You have deliberately misled me, and now my mouth is full of spines. The taste of this abominable vegetable is nothing like the juicy meat which I was thinking about." Positive and negative. The way in which a statement is phrased is not what makes it positive or negative. It is positive or negative in accordance with its significance, not its appearance. A no, which is constructive, is far better than a yes, which is not. Because no is something which people don't like because of having heard it often in their childhood, they tend to behave as if it were something bad, that is to say, unpleasing to them. It is only a step, though a mistaken step, from here to be able to call it negative, and therefore not constructive. In the land of fools. Once upon a time there were 3 wise men. They belonged to a place known as Fuzulistan, the land of fools. But this, of course, was only what its uncharitable neighbours called it. The inhabitants called it the country of civilization. These 3 wise men decided that they would go on a journey, because, as everyone knows, travel broadens the mind, and even the most learned can profit by experience. Quite soon after crossing the border, they came across an unusual object. It was a minaret, towering into the sky. "Ha ha!" said the first wise man. "Here is an item worthy of our observation. I will set you a test. How did this object come to be here, and what was the manner of its being produced?" The second wise man said, "It is evidently a dead plant or tree. It grew from a seed, or even a certain kind of egg." The third wise man disagreed. "Not at all. This obviously was built. It must have been constructed lengthwise on the ground and then hoisted to its present position." "You are both wrong," said the first wise man, "for it is evident that it was built by a race of giants. They were tall enough to lean down and place this thing here in its present position." It was concluded, after due consultation, that suitable care should be taken by the expedition to preserve itself from the giants, who might, after all, be dangerous. Confession. Confession is good for the soul, an admirable sentiment. It is valuable because it illustrates clearly something that its practitioners will ordinarily go to any lengths to conceal. That here they are not talking about a soul at all. They mean, I have no conception of a soul, and therefore attribute the pleasure which confession induces in me not to its real source, the discharge of surplus emotional energy, but to something sublime. This is a fine example of the real information which we can collect from the hidden language of man. Any number of comforting arguments could, of course, be found to deny or explain away this fact. There is no harm in listening to the arguments, so long as you are prepared to give an equal amount of attention to the observation of other people, to determine whether fact or argument is the more reliable. The spider. A child, dismembering a spider, found that he was left with a number of parts. There were legs, a body, and fur. Being a logical child, he concluded that the legs were from a camel, because camels have legs, the body from an elephant, and the fur from a mouse. Now, an adult would never reason like that, would he? Defensiveness. When people are told things which they do not want to hear, they produce or borrow certain standard arguments to enable them to exclude the new information from their relatively closed minds. You can usefully offset this tendency by remembering that most unfamiliar information is likely to be met by this response. Remember, too, that the things which you already know are mostly facts which would seem to be impossible, unlikely, or even symptoms of paranoia to a man or woman at a lower level of culture than yourself. It is this kind of understanding, not emotional reaction, which will enable you and others to face the truth and to learn more. The Scholar and the Philosopher. A scholar went one day to see a practical philosopher to determine the origins of his system. As soon as the question was asked, the master handed the academic a delicious peach. When it had been eaten, the master asked whether he would like another. The scholar ate the second peach. Then the philosopher said, "Are you interested in where this peach was grown?" "No," said the scholar. "That is your answer about my system," said the master. Suggestion and attention. The effect of a suggestion tends to be in proportion to the prestige of the source of the suggestion. Prestige is itself accumulated attention, accumulated and frozen attention. Attention fixing does not require the presence of the object. It may even occur, develop, and become fixed through the absence of the object. Dragon. "It is a dragon, destroyer of all!" cried the ants. Then a cat pounced and caught a lizard. Understanding. One cannot guarantee human understanding, but one can help to develop it. You can, however, enable others to understand only very little further than you yourself understand a thing. This is why the human heritage of study materials is so underused. The instructors are passing on only what they can, not what there is. Understanding one level of materials is only a stage in passing to other levels. To compromise with one's ignorance by assuming that there is no higher level is a serious weakness. It holds back others, causes one to confuse the vehicle with the content, and is a disguised operation of self-esteem. To believe that higher understanding is something which is not available to ordinary men is a mixture of the pessimist culture's bequest and, paradoxically, self-esteem again, manifested in, "If I don't understand it, there is nothing to understand," and, "If I don't like it, it is of no use." Time. 2 microbes said, "We may not seem to be much, but just you wait a little." Melons and mountaintops. If someone says to you, "Do melons often grow on mountaintops?" do you imagine that this is bound to be an attempt to add to the questioner's stock of information, and that he is interested in melons on the tops of mountains? Those who do not take such remarks as intended literally, interestingly enough, hardly ever go beyond the assumption that they are anything else than possibly meaningless or rhetorical. The valuable thing about this illustration is that it shows how people can apply just 3 possible interpretations: literal, meaningless, rhetorical. They certainly have the capacity to examine statements from other angles, but since they have not been taught how to do so, they are not able, because too lazy, to adopt any other viewpoint, even experimentally. Cat and dog. A cat and a dog were fighting. A man asked them what they were doing. They said, "The winner will decide which of us is a rat." "You are both wrong," said the man. So they set upon him and put him to flight. Curse and blessing. In the Middle East, one of the major blessings, which is also a curse, can be found in the commentaries of the teachings of spiritual masters. They are blessings for those who received them at the right time, and curses for those who ever since have struggled with them after they became anachronistic. Few people would eat a piece of meat after it has rotted, or a vegetable when it has become a fossil. But almost none has yet learned about the equivalent problem in literature and traditionalism. Let something become known as valuable or sublime, and people's greed will do the rest. Even if the fossil breaks their teeth and the putrid meat poisons them, they will stick to outdated commentaries. Dogs and jackals. A man out hunting sent his yellow hound after something lurking behind a tree. The dog chased out a jackal and headed him into a position where the hunter could shoot him. The dying jackal said to the hound standing over him, "Have you never heard the Persian proverb, 'The yellow dog is brother to the jackal'?" "I have indeed," said the dog, "but you are rather out of date. Brotherhood, to the more civilized, is connected with training and identity of interest. Man and hero. Man really is a hero. Everywhere you will find him struggling for freedom and opposing its curtailment. Yet very often he is obviously struggling for his own enslavement at the same time and with equal force. To be obsessed by the idea of freedom, for instance, is itself a form of slavery. Such people are in the chains of the hope of freedom, and are therefore able to do little else than struggle with them. What I am. A man sat in his room, thinking to himself. He said aloud, "I am what I can make myself. What a challenge! What vistas! What opportunities!" A piece of crumpled paper lying in the corner heard him. It said to itself, "How excellent to know that my own sentiments are shared by others. This is indeed an inspirational situation." Taboos, totemism, image building. It has been fashionable for some time now for investigators to delight in observing and reporting on the local manifestation of these things. It is useful to offset the parochial nature of most of such studies by remembering that these peculiarities are conspiracies to which the entire human race is party. Observation indicates that taboos, totemism, and image building are tendencies strongly evidenced in the theories, action, and exegetics of those who believe that they are only describing them. Demonstration. It is narrated that Mullah Nasruddin was once trying to walk along the top of a very high wall which was only about 3 inches wide. The crowd had gathered as he climbed to the top. When he fell down and twisted his ankle, people rushed up to him to find out what he had been doing. "I have been demonstrating," said Nasruddin, "that you cannot walk along a high wall which is exceedingly narrow without falling and twisting something." Function of religious symbols. When you see a traditional religious symbol today, you are generally looking at a piece of technical apparatus, or a representation of one, whose use has been forgotten, above all by the descendants of its own original designers. This is generally due to the growth of the superstition that a thing of beauty or associative significance has to evoke sentimentality, and that function is less sublime than emotion. The reverse, in fact, is the case. A motto of the human race. Let me do what I like, and give me approval as well. Unreliable friends. You need not wonder whether you should have an unreliable person as a friend. An unreliable person is nobody's friend. Genius. Note these remarks on genius, often quoted but not investigated. Genius, which means transcendent capacity of taking trouble. And genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Ignored or suppressed in these dicta is a major characteristic of genius. Both leave out the question of manner. With these prescriptions, you will not get genius. Genius, in order to operate, needs the knowledge of manner. What a horse! There is a certain kind of horse that beats all others for speed. It certainly gets you there. When, however, it skids to a halt, the rider is thrown over its head and usually cracks his skull. The answer to a fool. The proverb says that the answer to a fool is silence. Observation, however, indicates that almost any other answer will have the same effect in the long run. Duty. No duty is ignoble. What can be ignoble is the sight of people trying not to be ignoble. Both sides. To see both sides of a problem is the surest way to prevent its complete solution, because there are always more than two sides. Communication. For a long time now, people have been claiming that what is wrong with society is that there is a failure of communication. Many of these have had nothing to communicate, other than the assertion that they cannot communicate. They have communicated this effectively enough. Power. People say, because the phrase attracts them, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. This, however, neither eliminates nor makes comprehensible powerful people. The would-be righteous man should be able to taste the power-endowed man's feelings. Instead of being nauseated by the following, he should be able to perceive it. Power is delightful to those whom it delights. Absolute power to them would seem absolutely delightful. Generosity and wisdom. How are generosity and wisdom connected? Here is one way. A generous person may not have wisdom, but unlike others, he has the means to gain it. Exaggeration. Exaggeration is a standard peculiarity of man. To deprecate is often a form of exaggeration which people do not notice, because it appears to be its opposite. When advice exceeds its function, advice is priceless. When it becomes interference, it is preposterous. Saying a thing. It is not important to have said a thing first, or best, or even most interestingly. What is important is to say it on the right occasion. Opinion. Opinion is usually something which people have when they lack comprehensive information. Myth and man. Man is a myth-maker. Myth, when manipulated by unregenerates, is an even more effective man-maker. Man, as he imagines himself to be, in general, is a possibility, not a fact. For most people, the sort of man whom they imagine to exist, or assume themselves to be, does not yet exist. Credulity. Learn to be as analytical about things of which you are credulous as you are of those which you criticize. Pessimist. An egocentric pessimist is a person who thinks that he hasn't changed, but that other people are behaving worse than before. Affronted man. A man who, quoting the time from a clock which has run down, has this pointed out to him by someone else. That is an affronted man. Shut doors. People often say that a door to something is or has been shut. Do they, however, go so far as to investigate whether it has been locked as well? When you really face a problem and see it clearly, you realize that it is not the door and its shutting which are significant, but the presence and condition of a lock. This is one reason for informing the pessimist cultures, which imagine that their heritage is optimism and constructive response to challenge, that they need vision. A response based upon inadequate data is not a response. Belief. If you believe everything, you are not a believer in anything at all. The wise and the foolish. Fools expect themselves to be honoured by the wise. But if the wise do honour fools, it is for reasons unsuspected by the fools themselves. A frequent and diverting sight is that of some fools seeking honour from other fools. It becomes even more amusing when they are denied it. Words and thought. Words are an aspect of the attempted communication of thought. They are not thought. When we see words described as thoughts, we should make sure that we know this distinction. Talk. You know him not at all, so you can talk against him. You know him slightly, and you can boast about it. You know him well. Now you can talk against him again. Higher experience. People who have been profoundly affected by having had a higher inner experience should ponder the statement, when God wants to destroy an ant, he gives it wings. 3 kinds of literature. Note these 3 kinds of literature. The first is factual literature, whose intention is to provide information. The second is ephemeral literature, whose main function is to entertain. The third is specific literature, designed to help develop capacities in a certain readership. Literature which entertains may contain teaching materials as well. Truth. A thing, an idea, a statement is true only when and where it holds true. Something is true in accordance with its context. No context means no truth in the sense in which human thought understands it. Study and method. Study is a matter of having information and knowledge of how to study, what to study at any given time, and what not to study. It is also essential for any advance beyond ordinary educational levels to be effective, for one to know or to be able to apply under guidance the matter of with whom to study. Random study is no study. Studying things because they seem to be in one's field or because they just attract one is not real study. Good discipline is a part of study and exists for carrying out study. Because it is the undisciplined, not the disciplined, who overstudies and who amasses information which he cannot really digest in all its levels. Discipline also enables a person to focus on and off study and to refrain from it when it is not indicated for the improvement of his higher states. Although we must not shrink from the overt meaning of materials studied, on the factual plane, we have to realize that there are qualitative dimensions in study whose operating depend upon a knowledge of them. Those who do not know this have to learn it. Next, they have to find someone or some institution which knows how to do it and is willing and able to communicate it in a practical form. Stimuli. When a person has a jaded palate, as we all know, he needs more and more piquant and probably more varied taste stimuli to activate it. In current cultures, the result of overstimulation of the mental palate is today obvious. The analogy of the palate, however, is not completely exact, because the human mind has capacities of taste which in contemporary societies are not satisfied at all. The lack of this stimulus is because it is not realized that in this area a stimulus need not be intent in order to operate. The result of this ignorance is that people will not give a gentle stimulus a chance to operate, and reach forward to whatever seems most likely to afford them instant or deep stimuli. Such people have almost completely put themselves outside the range of the less crude stimulus. It is only when they are prepared to entertain the possibility of its existence, and prepared, too, to test its working, that they can be communicated with. We can make no progress with a demand like this: give me chili powder, but let it taste like rosewater. Tasting. He who tastes knows, but he who only thinks he tastes will not leave anyone alone. Meditation. Meditation without concentration and contemplation is not very different from water without wetness and coldness. Knowledge and power. Knowledge is power, they say. But if only power were knowledge, that would be something worth thinking about. Too late to learn? If proverbs had been kept in proper repair, it would have been registered that it is never too late to learn some things. It is always too late to learn other things. Difficulties in teaching. There have been communities and dedicated groups who have been given materials equivalent to 1,000 years of teaching and have hardly noticed it. This happens for the same reason that people who are frenziedly greedy may not even remember what they have eaten, or whether they have eaten. Born yesterday. Have you noticed how many people say, "I wasn't born yesterday," and act as if they were only born today? Change everything. If it were possible to do without food, there would be people who would urge its abolition. If one could live without eyes with any degree of comfort, there would be people to claim that they were the root of all evil. If time could be abolished, there would be people trying to get it done, on the grounds that we must have change and not stick to old-fashioned errors. Seeking. You say that you have come to seek. I have nothing to give you except the way to understand how to seek. But you think you can already do that. Preparation. In order to digest food, a man needs a stomach. Who troubles himself to inquire, however, whether a would-be wise man is correspondingly well prepared? Smoke and fire. The man who first said, "There is no smoke without fire," may have been describing the state of his contemporary technology, not enunciating a truth. Sheepskin. When you visit a sheep, do not wear a lambskin cap and claim to be a friend. Metaphysics. I don't know how it is with other subjects, but I do know that many people who imagine that they can talk and think about metaphysics wouldn't know it if they found it in their soup. Questions and answers. One of the big differences between questions and answers is that a question may be asked at almost any time and place, but its answer may come at a special time and place. Out of the trees. People say, "Only yesterday, so to speak, man came down from the trees. How, therefore, can he be anything of special consequence?" And yet they seldom say, "Look at that man over there. Only an hour ago, as it were, he was lying for 8 hours inert in bed. How, therefore, can he be anything of special consequence?" Desire. Desire without orientation is a game. What a pity that people should turn it into hypocrisy by pretending that it is something higher. When a game is being played, there is nothing higher possible to the players at that time. The door shuts. When a door bangs, people look at it, attracted by the noise. How few realize that it is at that time that they might instead be looking at another door opening, or preparing to open one. Miracles. What are called miracles, which people either believe in or do not, have a quite different function from what emotionalists imagine. They are useless if they only impress emotionally. They are, in reality, either byproducts and indications of some extra attainment, or exist to be recorded inwardly by a special organ of recognition. Doing. See clearly how a man is doing a thing. You will then be in a position to see what he is really trying to do. If you merely ask him, or inquire of a committed expert, you deserve all you get. Man. There is no inconsequential man, but what he has done to himself and what has been done to him, that can make him inconsequential. Deafness. I have discovered a marvellous remedy for many forms of deafness. It is called praise. The stag. When the lion had eaten its fill and the jackals had taken their share, the ants came along and finished up the meat from the bones of the haughty stag. I and me. Many people try to avoid using the word I to show or practice humility. The consequence of this is to fixate them upon the concept of I. They get the reverse of the effect originally intended. What is important is to know which I is involved in any act or statement. This comes only through the experience of the various I's in a person. Him who waits. They say, as you know, that all things come to him who waits. We are not told, of course, what eventually happens to this well-endowed individual. But what a prospect! Not what he wants comes to him who waits, not what he needs, but all things. Raw material. Listen to man. He thinks that he prizes himself above everything else, and yet he treats himself and his fellows as the cheapest raw material in the world. Sore eyes. A sight for sore eyes is an interesting phrase. Since no actual sight has ever benefited a sore eye, I suppose we could take it to mean that the incident is void of usefulness. Hard and easy work. Prescribing hard work for the soft or easy work for the hardy is generally nonsense. What is always needed in any aim is right effort, right time, right people, right materials. Contradictions. Remember that things which appear to you to be mutually contradictory are, in real philosophy, only such because of the viewpoint of the time of looking at them. Just as a child or an idiot cannot see how you can blow hot and cold, hot to warm your hands and cold to cool your soup, so can the underdeveloped human brain only think in comparably primitive patterns. Evolution. A man is deficient in understanding until he perceives that there is a whole cycle of evolution possible within himself, repeating endlessly, offering opportunities for personal development. Chalk and cheese. Chalk and cheese have far more characteristics in common than we would be led to believe by whoever framed the phrase purporting to illustrate differences by means of these two substances. Comprehensive materials. If you are given something to study, regard well the conditions which attach to the study. That is to say, study it when and where prescribed. The materials and manner of study may very well violate the habits of study which you have formed in the past. If you propose to study something comprehensive in an ignorantly selective manner, you might as well not start at all. Attraction. We all know people who are attracted to individuals and ideas, either because these resemble themselves, or because they are in some ways their opposites. The reason for the original attraction very easily becomes a barrier. There may be something in the person or the idea which can benefit the attracted. But this factor cannot beneficially affect the attracted person when he is still deriving satisfactions from the minor pleasure of being or thinking like or unlike someone else. You may eat a cherry because you like its flavour. It will never, however, be of nutritional value if you keep it in your mouth all the time. Proper study of this contention is exceedingly important. Both ends. We are adjured not to burn the candle at both ends. But how many people have verified that the parallel may be void, since it is not physically possible? Fools. They say there is no fool like an old fool. I have, however, observed several. They were, as it happens, young fools. Supersession. Try to wear the shoes which you had when you were 2, 4, or 6 years old. You have a similar problem if you try, say, to follow a book of prescriptions written in Syriac. If there is no supersession, there is no fresh growth. If we are not to operate in the mode of today, we shall at best reproduce effects designed for people of yesterday. The candle. "This candle burns for 100 hours, said the merchant to the blind man. "I don't know about the burning, but I do know about the usefulness to me," said the blind man. Unworthy friend. He is generous with what you have, and is economical with anything of his own. These twin practices have told you that he is unworthy. Yet he can still convince you otherwise because people believe mere words readily and are eager for attention. They welcome sham actions. The word, therefore, is speaking louder than the action.